Welcome to the Citizens Band Radio Hour. Thoughtful conversations that explore issues of media and journalism, democracy and citizenship. The Citizens Band Radio Hour is sponsored by the Center for Media and Citizenship at the University of Virginia. You can visit the center online at mediaandcitizenship.org. Here's your host, Coy Barefoot.
We'll begin with my friend Bob Roberts. Bob is a professor of political science and government at James Madison University, and it is always a privilege to have him on this program. Bob, good afternoon, sir. I hope you're well.
Glad to be here.
Bob, let's just start with some broad strokes. How do you make sense of what happened in this election? I know there's a lot of moving parts here, but let's just start with the camera pulled back as far as we can. What in the world happened?
In a sense, we're back to 2000. In other words, we thought, or at least the Democrats thought, that the nature of the electorate fundamentally changed between 2008 and 2012. It did not. In other words, with 8 years in office, Obama did nothing to change the fundamental character of the electorate, which means white voters vote radically different than non-white voters. And we saw that in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which were the only outliers in this race. Really, the race was, in a sense, exactly the way it was supposed to go, except for Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And if you look at the demographics of those states, those are predominantly heavily white states with large numbers of working-class individuals, and Trump played to those three states. He barely won them. I think we forget. He barely won Wisconsin, he barely won Pennsylvania, and he barely won Michigan. So that's what happened. Why it happened is completely another question, but that's what happened. In other words, predominantly white states voted along with the way white voters are voting all over the place, and they did not, in a sense, allow their traditional political identity, for example, the Democratic Party, to, in a sense, change their behavior, unlike white voters in the majority of states that are predominantly white.
And what was the success in those predominantly white parts of the country, you think? What was the key to Trump's success?
Okay, there were two sides of it. Number one, he did no better than Romney. I think we forget. He thinks there's an urban legend out there. He turned out more voters. That did not happen. In other words, he didn't turn out any more voters than Romney turned out. What happened was the Democratic voters in those states, and we're talking marginally, we're talking about 30,000 votes in each state, didn't turn out. That included African-American voters, which were not that different, but particularly white voters, white female voters, and young millennial voters either sat home and did not vote, or they voted for third parties, which cost Clinton those three states.
Again, shades of 2000. Exactly what happened in 2000, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the criticism Obama is getting now, and historians will basically nail him for this. You had 8 years to basically build a new coalition. You didn't do it. So when you weren't on the ticket, because you were so charismatic, whoever came after you could not duplicate your charisma, and they were going to lose. That's what the historians will say. You had 8 years to rebuild the Democratic Party, to build it from the base up. You didn't do it. And so I'm afraid that's what historians are going to blame him for.
Bob, Tom Franks was on this program just a few weeks ago, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at his new book, Listen Liberal, but it documents the dismantling of the traditional Democratic Party, the party of the people, beginning in the 70s with young progressives who took over the party and moved away from their parents' Democratic Party, the party of FDR. They moved away from that and became essentially, as he puts it, the party of the 10%. You know, the Republicans have the 1%, the Democrats, under these new Democrats, they were called in the 80s under Clinton, who was their standard bearer, They became the party of the 10%, of the professional elite. And
I have to disagree. Let me explain. I disagree with that thesis. Because what happened was, if you actually look at the election results, Clinton did quite well. She won the majority of the vote, okay? And her numbers were very, very good in most blue states, okay? So in a sense, the Democratic base is as large as it has been. It's solid. It's solid in all those blue states. Those blue states aren't going anywhere for the foreseeable future. What happened was that there aren't enough of those blue states under the Electoral College. There are 3 states where, it's not an indictment of the entire Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is stronger than it has been in those blue states in decades. The problem is there aren't enough of those states in the Electoral College.
But you just got finished saying that the Democrats, that Trump managed to flip Michigan and Wisconsin because the Democratic Party couldn't hold on to them, that their message no longer resonated.
They couldn't flip them because, to be in all honesty, Democrats are more idealistic than Republicans. Republicans are more pragmatic. What happened, for example, Romney got more evangelical votes. Trump got more evangelical votes than Romney did. Now, how do you explain that? You would think evangelicals would be upset about Trump's lifestyle. They voted on one issue, abortion. They didn't care about anything else. They voted on abortion. That shows you they're strategic voters, number one. Number two, women voters, Clinton only carried women voters 51 to 46%. Okay? Now, how could that be the case when Trump's behavior with women is reprehensible, or alleged behavior is reprehensible? How could that many women vote for Trump? They voted strategically. In other words, other issues were more important to them than the treatment of women. Now, how can that be? That's the way it is. Women do not vote nearly as homogeneously as males do. And finally, African American voters turned out all right, but they did not turn out in the numbers they turned out for Obama, primarily because young African American voters are completely disaffected. They don't trust anybody. So what you have is idealistic young Democrats casting their votes for Stein, Johnson, or not voting. How in a sense do you convince idealistic young men and women to throw away their idealism and vote pragmatically? The Republicans have learned how to do that. The Democrats have not. And that's why they got in trouble in those 3 states.
And when you talk about how Obama failed in those 8 years to build this coalition, is that what you're referring to? What exactly did he fail to do?
For example, in 2008, he had all these young people enthusiastic. They work for him, and they work for him, and they work for him. They expected him to make some major changes. Now, what happened was he dismantled his operation. In 2010, he got killed. So somehow, as a politician, he would have had to push issues early on to appeal to those young voters, that coalition. Healthcare was not one of them. Healthcare did not appeal to young voters because most young voters are fairly healthy. So he didn't make that an issue. He would have had to make issues like climate change, immigration reform,
student debt crisis,
gay rights. All those social issues would have had to be put on the front burner to begin with to keep that coalition together. He was afraid to do that. He went back to traditional Democratic issues such as health care, which did not help him with anybody, believe it or not. As we turned out, the Obamacare they thought was going to help him, it didn't. Because what happened with Obamacare is once these exchanges were put in place, they were so damn expensive that people got angry at them. Even though they had health care, they got angry. And so he made a classic mistake of not knowing how to build a coalition, which he failed to do. And he was able to win, clearly. He's a wonderfully charismatic person. but he couldn't pass his charisma on to Clinton, who was a terrible candidate. I mean, beyond belief. She was a terrible candidate. And therefore, this is what happens. You lose 3 states by about an average of 30,000 votes. That's nothing. That's about 5 votes per precinct in those states. That simply shows you had nothing to do with those millennial voters, those African-American voters who were so alienated they didn't care what happened. Now they care, but they didn't care when they – in fact, many of them, the surveys, they didn't think Clinton would lose. That's the sad – they didn't think she'd lose. They thought they could vote the way they did, and she'd still win. And therefore, they could uphold their values, and there would not be consequences. Republicans know that's not the way the world works. So you have a very idealistic Democratic base and a very pragmatic Republican base, and pragmatism wins over idealism almost every time.
So what about the future of the Democratic Party? I mean, I remember before the election, all the narrative in the media was, what's the Republicans going to do in the future? What's the party going to be after Trump? The assumption was post-Trump would be Tuesday, but now they're saying the same thing about the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party isn't in bad shape. The problem is those marginal voters have to have a reason to shift again, okay? Got to remember what happened in 1982. Ronald Reagan came in 80, a landslide. In 82, he got slaughtered in the midterm elections. He lost the Senate. He lost the House. Why did he lose the House, and why did he lose the Senate? Because the country went into one of the worst recessions in American history. By 84, the economy was booming, and he got reelected. All of this depends, the future of the Democratic Party depends on the future of Trump, what happens to the economy. That's it. If the economy goes into the dumpers and there is a serious recession by 82, Trump loses the House and he loses the Senate. And he's back in the same. If it doesn't, if somehow the economy booms, then Trump is fine. So in a sense, those marginal voters, a minuscule number of voters, will quickly shift their allegiance back if their personal lives don't get better. For example, how Trump is going to get high-paying jobs for in those working class Americans who voted for him in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, I have no idea.
Didn't he say he was going to bring back all those manufacturing jobs?
Yeah, he's going to bring back all those high-paying jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea how it's going to happen.
Right.
Now, there's a way you can, I mean, if you want to look at the dark side, if we look at the Star Wars analogy, okay?
Yes, let's do it.
If you want to look at with Banyan in what's his name in the White House, I'm sure he knows the dark side. That's come up, what do you do? What do you do if your economy doesn't do well, things are falling apart? You have one option. You make people scapegoats. In other words, that's the Nixonian approach. You basically blame it all on, criminals. You blame it all on immigrants. You blame it on all crazy, That's what you can do. Now, that can work temporarily, but it's not going to work permanently if then 2 more years later, by 2000, things are worse. So in a sense, the Democratic problem is really a problem of idealism. I remember vividly in 1968, okay, when Hubert Humphrey was fighting Richard Nixon. And those of us I was young at the time, knew what Nixon was like. I mean, he was despicable, his background. And the Democratic idealists wouldn't back Humphrey. They wouldn't come home because of Robert Kennedy and McCarthy and the war and everything else. They just wouldn't do it. And they paid a heavy price. And there's nothing wrong with idealism. I'm not criticizing people for doing what they did. I understand why they did it. They didn't believe it would happen. They honestly didn't believe. I knew a lot of my students who didn't vote for a president, voted for a third party, because when I talked to them, I didn't tell them who to vote for. I told them, what do you think might happen? Nothing is going to happen because Hillary's going to win, because the poll said she's going to win, so I don't have to worry about it. I can have everything. I can have my integrity, and things aren't going to get that worse. And so the Democrats really are just like the Republicans, are basically hostages of the economy. If the economy does well, Trump does well. If the economy does really badly, he's a one-term president. And things can, do you wish? Then you get into a really bad situation. Do you wish for an economic disaster to gain political power again? I don't know. But in a sense, this is small numbers. We're talking 30,000 voters per state. And the Clinton campaign just didn't understand this. They believed these people would come home. They did not. They couldn't believe women voters would only vote 51%, 47% in terms of women voters in terms of a difference between Trump and Clinton. They should have known better because women do not vote like men. Women split their votes. Men do not. White men tend to vote as a homogeneous group, and we could spend a lot of time explaining why white men vote the way they do. But white women do not vote the same way white men do. They are much more complex in terms of how they cast their vote. White men are not. They vote very homogeneously for a number of complex reasons. And so Clinton completely misjudged what was happening. They believed those polls. I'm not sure what their internal polls were showing. And they didn't get the electorate didn't turn out the way they thought it would. So they made a huge mistake and wasted $1 billion. That's how much they spent. And it's not because of the FBI. I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with the FBI. So it was just a very badly run campaign. They didn't really know the electorate they were facing. They didn't believe the electorate would behave the way it did. So that's a simple answer.
If you're just joining me, my guest is Bob Roberts. He is a professor of political science and government at James Madison University. Bob, you mentioned the polls. In the wake of the election, Larry Sabato's crystal ball posted online for the first time ever that the crystal ball is shattered. And that fits into the polls being so far off the mark.
They weren't off the – let me say, that's a myth. They weren't off the mark. Most of the polls were exactly right. Florida was within that margin area. All but 3 states. Sorry. The polls are very, very accurate in all but 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The other polls were very accurate. I mean, New Hampshire was tied. Basically tied. Colorado, the polls were showing she took Colorado. She took Nevada. She took all the states she was supposed to take. And the Republican and Trump took all the states he was supposed to take, including Ohio. What happened is 3 states didn't fit the profile. Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And because they didn't predict, they mispredicted the turnout of different groups in those states. They were projecting higher numbers of college graduates, and I think they greatly underestimated the number of voters in those 3 states who withhold their votes, who wouldn't vote for either. And then, for example, Jill Stein got 48,000 votes in Pennsylvania. She got 30,000 votes in Wisconsin, and in Michigan she got 50,000 votes. If those had flipped, Clinton would be president right now. And so explain to me, from a pragmatic point of view, and I'm sure you have a lot of Jill Stein supporters in your audience, how can you cast a vote for the Green Party, which in a sense is not that the Green Party views are not that dissimilar than the Democratic Party, knowing that this might happen? And the answer is your idealism basically is so important to you, you're going to exercise your right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in a sense, that drained votes away from traditional and those who withheld their vote. Simply, there were about 40,000 in Michigan who withheld, about 40 to 50,000 in each of those states who didn't vote for either, didn't vote in the presidential race. So they misunderstood that. The Democrat, I think they thought turnout would be a lot higher. Virginia turnout was 68%. I mean, Virginia was exactly on the polls, 5 points. And so Virginia is clearly a purple state right now. I mean, a blue state or purple state. But those unique characteristics of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin that Joe Biden tried to deal with, she could not deal with them. And she did not have anything to offer them. What am I going to do? I can't backtrack on my free trade. Now, is Trump actually going to impose 35% duties on China? If he does, what happens to inflation in this country goes sky high, and it drives the country into a recession. So will he back down? I don't know. Clearly, Congress doesn't want it. I mean, clearly he has no support in Congress for imposing 35% duties on. So in a sense, much of what he said, he can't implement. That doesn't matter. In other words, the fact that you say something, people are so desperate in those states that they're willing to go with you because they don't think anyone is paying attention to them. And he paid attention to them, and he won those 3 states very, very narrowly.
So, Bob, it seems like one of the takeaways from this election is that all the money in the world and one of the best ground games in campaign politics still can't win you a national election.
I think that's, once again, I think we're jumping to the ground game worked very well in most of those blue states for her. It worked. In Florida, they came very close. In all the other blue states, it worked in Colorado. It works in a sense, it did work. It didn't work in those states because those states are somewhat unique in terms of the problem they're facing. They got devastated by what Bill Clinton did in the 1990s, by entering into the free trade agreements, which he supported and she supported. They got devastated. Those high-paying jobs just left. And these people many of these people, rural Pennsylvania, rural Wisconsin, are in terrible shape.
And to go back to 92, Ross Perot was right. That giant sucking sound of jobs going across the border.
But free trade has benefited more Americans than it's hurt. Let me try to explain. Free trade has led to, for those of us who have, let's say, non-working class jobs, it has benefited us tremendously. Our costs are down. What we spend on clothes, what we spend on a huge number of items, are much lower than they've ever been. Now, so a lot of us has benefited greatly from free trade. A fairly small percentage of the population, particularly in those states, have got decimated by it. So if you're running a campaign with an electoral college, and we haven't talked about electoral college, it creates a dilemma for you. She won the popular vote. Let me remind people of that. She won the popular vote, okay? So it's not if the population rejected her. It didn't. What happened was the population in 3 states rejected her, or North Carolina and Florida.
And just barely so.
And so that's not the same thing. When the Electoral College causes major distortions in the electoral process. Now, we're not getting rid of it, obviously, but it causes distortions where a bright candidate like Trump can basically say things with little hope of implementing them, okay? And in one election, what I'm going to do, I'm no worse off voting for him than voting the way I'm. How can my life be made worse for those people? And so, on the other hand, Trump is not in the situation Ronald Reagan was. Ronald Reagan had this huge mandate. He has no mandate. He has a reverse mandate. He's going to face intense opposition in those blue states. And as soon as he puts together a Supreme Court nominee who wants to basically turn the clock back, that's going to cause all hell to break loose. If he tries to deport millions of undocumented residents who are primarily in blue states, okay, you could get a situation similar to what happened before the Civil War. And I'm not talking about a civil war. I'm talking about massive resistance in those states, much like there was massive resistance to the Fugitive Slave Act, where people living would not cooperate. So in a sense, his dilemma is how in the world can he govern and at the same time implement his agenda? I don't know. I mean, because the country is so fragmented regionally now that the federal government does not have the power in any reasonable way. I don't think ICE has the ability to go into urban areas, round up people, and deport them without massive resistance. Now, in rural areas like Seminole Valley, where we have large numbers of undocumented residents, much higher than your area, it's possible because there's not going to be any major resistance. But in the urban areas where you have large numbers of there's no way ICE is going to be able to do it without the cooperation of local police, and I don't think he's going to get the cooperation of local police. So I don't see how he implements hardly anything. He may reverse Roe v. Wade if Justice Ginsburg leaves, but all reversing Roe v. Wade does is return abortion back to the states, and you'll get blue states allowing abortion and red states not allowing abortion. So that doesn't mean abortion goes away. There's no way to get a constitutional amendment to ban abortion. You'll just have what we had prior to 1974. So that may seem terrible, but that's the, so in a sense, I don't see how he does anything nearly unless there happens to be a huge economic boom and much like in 84, everybody's happy again. Otherwise, I don't see what he does.
Bob, stay with me. I've got to take a very quick break, and we'll continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back. My guest is Bob Roberts. He's a professor of political science and government at James Madison University. Bob, you mentioned the Electoral College. I'm curious what your students are saying in the wake of this election about the Electoral College and how you explain this to them. Is this something we need to hang on to? I mean, you had said just a few minutes ago there's no way we're getting rid of it.
It can't be changed because small states won't agree to it. So we're stuck with it forever. Because small states are not going to abandon it because it gives them an incremental advantage, not significant. So we should get away with blaming this on the Electoral College. It really has nothing to do with Electoral College. It has everything to do with the polarization in American politics, number one, which has become extreme, as serious as it would be prior to the Civil War. And secondly, it has a lot to do with complex psychological issues that Americans are dealing with. Let me give you an example. In reaction to Trump's win, we've seen across the country vicious behavior on the part of Trump supporters. I mean, just vicious. Either Facebook or taunting people. Now, we didn't think, some of us thought it was there. I did, but other people thought it was there. But a lot of us thought that vicious hatred had been reduced. It hasn't. And so the danger of the Trump what's the sad thing about what Trump did, and he claimed last night in 60 Minutes that he didn't do it, that he has empowered people who've held these views to come out and attack. And we're seeing on college campuses across the country. We're seeing it in social media, which has become absolutely awful in terms of the expression of these views. So large numbers of people are now going to use this to attack. Maybe not physically, but verbally, to harass people. That is a terrible situation. And that's a situation we're going to have to deal with in every community in the country, on every college campus. People walking down the street. There's a huge number of people who are going to feel that this is not their country anymore, and that they're going to be terribly psychologically damaged by this. And I don't think they believed it was going to happen, but it has happened, and it's happening. How do you put that genie back in the bottle? Who does it? I mean, I don't know in terms of, because you have massive resentment, and people's views don't change that quickly. There's something called implicit bias that I teach in my classes. And implicit bias is where we are brought up with these biases that we won't recognize. And most of the time we will suppress them. But in a case like this, where a presidential candidate was expressing those same biases we have, whatever reason, maybe it was doing this for political reasons, then other people feel they can express those views. And it's extremely damaging to society as a whole. That's what I worry about the most. I don't really worry about the legislation passing or everything else. What I worry about in a sense, you're going to have two literally armed camps out there who won't back down because they're not going to take it. It's not going to be a situation where people roll over. They'll confront each other. And what does Trump do to stop it? What does the police do to stop it? I mean, it's a dangerous situation, which leads to and that's what the sad state of affairs of this has caused. That you've got two deeply divided camps who don't want to talk to each other, who hate each other's guts, and that leads to a very, very bad situation unless someone could diffuse it. And whether Trump has the willingness to really diffuse it, I don't know. I mean, he's going to have to do a lot to diffuse it. And bring in who he brought into the White House is just sending the wrong message. I mean, he may have helped you win, but you don't put someone in with those views in the White House.
You mean Steve Bannon as his chief strategist?
You don't do it. I'm sorry. That's like, waving that's a horrible thing to do.
It's like moving into the Oval Office and hanging a Confederate flag. Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it's just horrible. And he thinks he's very loyal. He thinks he helped him, and he did help him. But that doesn't mean you do that. And it shows that he doesn't really understand what he unleashed. And I don't know how you climb down from this.
And along those same lines, Bob, the people in America now who say they're scared, women, the poor, people of color, Muslims, gays and lesbians, transgenders, people with special needs, we can't look at them and say, oh, no, you shouldn't be scared. I look at them and I say, you know what? You probably should be.
Absolutely, you should be. Because you have people who've held these beliefs, these resentments, these hatred for a long time. Now they feel empowered to do it. And it's these one act. It's not as if you have a mob. It's one act. I'm walking down the street. Someone yells at me. Someone posts something on my Facebook. I'm scared. Okay? So you don't know what's going to happen. You can't feel secure anywhere because you're afraid that someone is going to say something nasty to you because they now feel free to do so. We're seeing that on college campuses, where you're seeing some vicious things on college campuses. What are the schools going to do? First of all, how they're going to track down the people who are doing it. And first of all, what are they going to do? We had that incident at UVA, okay? And I'm not going to get involved in what should happen to those officers who did what they did.
Right.
Okay? But that was one incident that has terrible and will have terrible consequences to students at UVA.
And just really quickly, for those who are scratching their heads wondering what it was, in the wake of the election, there were some members of the University of Virginia police force who, over a bullhorn or some kind of loudspeaker system, yelled at students something like "Make America Great Again," "Go Trump." Students who were out protesting the results of the election. And they have been put on administrative leave, but you're right.
I I understand. I mean, I can see why people are people. Okay, so they got caught up in the emotions, but that can have a devastating impact on students who say, "Gee, I've got officers doing that."
Yeah, the people who are being paid to keep the members of the community feeling safe.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying what should happen to them. I don't. That's not the issue.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah,
the issue is these little events, one-on-one, have tremendous consequences on people's psyche. And unless the president does a lot more to say, basically, I'm sorry. Okay, I got carried away. I didn't mean to do this. Those empowered to basically express what they believe will keep doing it. And the FBI has reported now there has been a huge surge in hate crimes across the country, and they told him. And he says, yesterday on 60 Minutes, he looks into the camera and say, "Stop it." Okay, that's nothing.
Well, he blames the Democrats and Hillary Clinton.
Right. I mean, it's so in a sense that I don't know what he does. I mean, I just don't know what he does because it's not going to go away. I mean, as soon as these, for example, Supreme Court issue becomes, if you begin sending ICE agents out, rounding up 3 million people initially and throwing them out, I mean, that's going to just touch off. I don't know. I mean, it's so in a sense, someone has to de-escalate this.
And if I hear you right, from where you sit, the most disconcerting part of all of this is the social unrest that has been unleashed by the tactics that he used, the demagoguery that he used, playing to the prejudices, playing to the fears, playing to the anger of voters. The tactics he used have unleashed a certain social unrest that pits, Americans against each other.
Yeah, I don't like to use the term demagoguery. For example, throughout American history, we've had movements that have been reactionary, okay, and against change. Okay, much of the Reagan era was reaction against change. Okay, we want the things the way they were. What's different now is due to what we call the Great Sort. And the Great Sort of political science came about a decade. We are now living increasing with people like us. We are living in rural areas. We don't know a lot of people not like us. We're segregating ourselves based on religion, beliefs. So when you segregate each other and you've got, then you don't have any empathy for other people because you don't know them. You don't respect them. And that's what leads to social unrest, like prior to the Civil War. You had a situation where the North and South just didn't associate with each other. And so that's what's damaging about this is in a sense, on these one-on-one communications, particularly social media, that someone, religious leaders have to do something about this, evangelical leaders have to do something about this, the president needs to do something about this.
Which he's not likely to do. He's not likely to do that.
They have to do something, or things are going to deteriorate. And it's not going to be. It's going to be a strange form of deterioration. In other words, you're going to have in the blue areas resistance, and then in the red areas they're going to get madder and madder about the resistance in the blue areas, and so it's going to be. I don't know how you bring it down, and I think that's what a lot of very good people will think about this. How do the red leaders and the blue leaders understand that both of them have a lot to lose unless they bring it down? And Trump has to take the leadership and bring it down, and right now he's not showing it. And
as you point out, his chief strategist, his primary advisor, is Steve Bannon, who is the leader of the alt-right movement in America, where it's for him the Republican Party is too liberal,
and he has no support within the Republican Party. And so he tried to compromise, okay? He put, what's his name, as his chief of staff.
Brent Previous, yeah.
And this won't work. It's not going to work. And to think this is going to work, he's crazy. He's crazy as this is going to work. It's not. And so you wonder what he does when, for example, there are massive demonstrations in New York shutting down the city. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it could happen in 6 or 7 months. And New York City grinds to a halt because of massive demonstrations, or a city grinds to a halt. What does he do? Local police can't handle it. Are you going to call it National Guard? I don't think the National Guard wants to handle it. What does he do? And so he has to in a sense project this could happen and basically find a way, since he is not a popularly elected president, find a way to bring it down. And he does not. It doesn't indicate so far he's willing to do that. And unless he's willing to do, in terms of understand, you lost the popular vote. You barely won 3 states. You do not have a mandate like Ronald Reagan had, where he won almost every state, and by tens of millions of votes. You are a marginal. In fact, if you look at the number of voting age citizens who voted for him, including those who did not vote at all, he has less than, I think, 30% of voting age citizens voted for him. If you take the number of people who didn't vote, number one, and then take the people who actually voted, it's about 30% of the electorate.
Oh my gosh!
That's what it is, because we had the lowest turnout since 2000. So a large number of people didn't vote. Number one, and those who voted, they split evenly. So it comes to about 30, maybe a little more than 30% of those are voting age citizens who actually cast their votes for him. I mean, that's because a lot of Americans, voting age citizens, don't vote. So he's less than. I mean, he has no mandate whatsoever, but he doesn't recognize that. And Congress is because of gerrymandering, is under heavy Republican control. So this is not a very good situation we're facing. And so someone has to exercise statesmanship and bring it down. Trying to bring down the rhetoric.
But he has given no indication at all that he's going to do that, and he keeps doubling down on the divisive rhetoric. It
remains to be seen. The question how bad things get, or they may not get, or I'm anticipating things getting bad. Maybe they won't. Maybe the tax cuts won't send the deficit through the roof. Okay? Maybe they won't. Maybe the Supreme Court fight won't rip the country apart. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, unlikely. But on the other hand, if his idea, Congress may not approve anything he wants. What he can do, which I think is going to be the trigger, he can to immediately order ICE to begin deporting millions of people, and ICE agents will do so because a lot of the ICE agents are very resentful of Obama. In other words, they want to deport people.
And Trump has said that he wants to start with, and this may be it, but he wants to start with the known undocumented immigrants who have criminal backgrounds, who have criminal record.
Obama's been doing that already. They put a high. They have a high. Those are hard to find. So the dilemma is, you could find people to deport fairly easily. They don't hide very well. Okay? So what is ICE going to do? Are they going to spend the resources it takes to find these people who are very good at hiding? I mean, there are some people who are very good at hiding, and there are other people who are not very good at hiding. Who's easier to round up? Who's easier? A 15-year-old high school student or a criminal who knows fake ID, who knows how to stay out of anybody's way? And he'll have to have numbers to prove he's deporting people. So I suspect that this idea that he's only going to deport criminals is not going to hold, because he will want to show he's deporting lots of people. And a lot of people are going to get caught up who probably should not get caught up initially. And so in a sense, that's going to be the trigger, because he can do that without any congressional approval. The president has almost absolute authority over who to deport and who not to deport. So that's going to be the initial flashpoint. In other words, what's going to happen in cities? What resistance will be to doing that? And particularly the economies of many of those cities are dependent upon undocumented workers.
And so you're going to have, it's like, it's like Germany in World War II. You're going to have families hiding other members of other families.
Right. I mean, I don't know what, I mean, Obama deported more people than any other president in recent memory. But he wasn't going to break up families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a lot of those Republican congressmen who are adamant to deport as many people as they can. Now, why? It's very interesting because the business people are backing them don't want to do it. So the real question is, will the business people giving them, campaign contributions, et cetera, will tell them, you've got to do something. You can't do this. Our businesses won't operate.
Yeah, well, welcome to the dilemma of the modern Republican Party.
Yeah.
I mean, do you please your corporate paymasters, or do you please the crowd that's screaming at the rally?
That's going to be interesting. I mean, that's going to be interesting.
So, Bob, just to try to put a bow on this has the potential, in all probability, to get much, much worse.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think Trump underestimates how bad it can get. He's not Richard Nixon. There's no indication his personality. He wants to be liked. Richard Nixon didn't care. Okay? This is not Nixon. This is Trump. And Trump wants everyone to like him. He can't do what he wants to do and expect people to like him. And it's going to be an intact. I don't know how he wrangles this. Whether, I have no idea. But we all know just in this short period of time, tensions are rising. People are getting angry and angry on both sides. Luckily, they're not living. A lot of them aren't living. College campuses are somewhat unique because college campuses, you have people from all different parts of society in one place. You can't sort a college campus. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Sorting is not possible. So these tensions are more likely to erupt on college campuses first.
Oh, my gosh.
They absolutely are.
Because people with such different backgrounds are mixed in together.
Because they're mixed together.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. And that's what the danger of modern college campus. It is a melting pot of people with very different views and ideas. And that's where the tensions are most likely to erupt first because they're not sorted out. And I think college administrators are scared to death. I know they are scared to death because they know that on a college campus you have a cross-section of people who have very different beliefs, who are right on top of each other, who are very apt at social media, who might not act particularly rationally. And so much like the 60s, where we saw the sharp tension on college campuses, the anti-war reaction to an anti-war, you're likely to see it on college campuses first. Because the sorting isn't there, and so what do the college administrators do? If they crack down on the let's say the people who are doing bad things, then they may get a reaction from the politicians, and I'm not sure what they know they're going to do in terms of. And I know they're trying to preempt it, but I don't know what they're going to do. You might get in terms of massive demonstrations or something. I don't know.
Bob, did you ever think that you would see this kind of? I mean, this is scary. This is a scary moment in this country. Did you think that we would see it? I mean, if history is any guide, it's inevitable. I mean, it's going to happen. These things happen to nation states in the modern age. But I certainly didn't. I just didn't see this coming. This is scary.
It's been coming a long, long time as this polarization has occurred. We saw it after Obama's election. The Tea Party, which was a terrible movement. In other words, the Tea Party wasn't real. It was a reactionary movement against an African American president in large measure. Okay, and so that's what it was. And so Obama was able to keep his coalition together. But he didn't change the nature of the country. He thought his election would result in a new era. It didn't. It resulted in a backlash. And the
leader of the birther movement becomes the president.
Yeah, but in a sense, we are divided, so it's not as if you're living next door to each other. I mean, that makes it less likely for violence. But what you more like is paralysis in certain parts. What Trump doesn't understand is the wealth of the nation. is primarily in urban areas. In other words, it's an information society now. And the wealth of the country is being generated primarily in urban areas. Okay? That's where the anger is going to be the most. And if those urban areas begin to, let's say, protests out of control, we saw Black Lives Matter in a minor way, okay? Then what does he do? The economy depends upon those cities operating. It doesn't depend upon rural areas operating. It simply doesn't. It depends upon the urban areas operating. And then if so, that's what he's got to worry about, because how is he going to deal with that social unrest in those urban areas if it gets out of control? If the incident hate crimes keep increasing across the country, then there's going to be a backlash. Do something about it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to stop it?
And then we could see, like the Arab Spring, where you have 1 million people go into the streets. We could see that in New York City, for example, and then shut down the subway system.
Absolutely. Or you shut down the economy. And so he's in a difficult position. He lost in those areas where the wealth is located. Okay? And so I don't know what hopefully he'll come to a census once he's inaugurated that he has to do something. He won't try to carry through with the mass deportations. He won't try to
build a wall.
He won't try to do all these crazy things. The problem, the fear he's going to have if he doesn't, then is he going to get a backlash from his own supporters? And so he's in a very extremely difficult position. And the Democrats, I'm sorry, this is not a disaster for Democrats. It's not a crisis for Democrats. It was a result of a very poorly managed campaign for a very flawed candidate who should never have run after that email situation was disclosed. She should not have run because there's no rational explanation for what she did. There wasn't. There was never a rational explanation for why you would do that as Secretary of State when security is at the top, okay? And she couldn't explain it, and it hurt her terribly. On the other hand, Sanders could not have won because Sanders would not have appealed to those white working-class voters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin no matter what he tried. They weren't going to vote for him. And so that wasn't the option. The only possible candidate who might have stopped this is Joe Biden, who was thinking of running because exactly this. He knew what could happen, and Biden would have had a chance of holding Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin together. He would have had the ability.
Yeah.
But in a sense, it's been coming for a long, long time, and there isn't. It's going to be interesting in leadership in his perspective. Is he a mature enough person, and he doesn't hold to any beliefs, which is good. Okay, in a sense, he really doesn't. He's shifted throughout his life. He's shifted his views back and forth, and that's a good thing because he may be bright. He's very bright. He may be saying, "Okay, I need to readjust." Okay, I will readjust. My supporters will accept it because they like me, called a personality, much like Obama. I can get away with a lot of stuff to make changes, etc., and diffuse the situation. It's possible. He might do it.
It's going to be hard to do with Steve Bannon at your elbow.
Absolutely. It'd be very difficult with him at your side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be very, very difficult. And that's why it was a terrible decision to put him there.
Bob, I got to run. I really appreciate it. I know I kept you over, but let's talk again soon. I really do appreciate it.
Okay,
thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Citizens Band Radio Hour, a production of the Center for Media and Citizenship at the University of Virginia. Archived podcasts are available online at mediaandcitizenship.org. The executive producers for the program are Siva Vaidyanathan and Coy Barefoot.